On Christmas Eve, my son called me and said bluntly, "Don't come, Mom. You don't fit the atmosphere of the party. My guests are all high society, and you'd only embarrass me." I was stunned. 8 years ago, I had lain on an operating table, donating him one of my kidneys to save his life. 6 years ago, I emptied my lifetime savings, even went into debt, to buy him a $2.5 million house, but the deed still carried my name. And yet that night, all I received in return was rejection and humiliation. He treated me as a burden, a stain on the polished image he was so desperate to maintain. For a few seconds I was frozen, but then a smile crept across my face. Because he had forgotten one simple truth: the very house he flaunted to the world had never really been his. And with just one phone call, everything he thought he owned could be taken away, on that very Christmas Eve. My name is Marion Johnson, 60 years old. To anyone meeting me for the first time, I might seem like an ordinary black woman, a slightly full figure, hands calloused from years of hard maintenance work, dark circles etched under my eyes from sleepless nights. But only I know the truth. Every stitch on my abdomen, every scar from surgery is proof that I once cut away a part of my own body to keep my only son alive. In 2017, Aaron was barely in his 20s, bursting with dreams as a senior marketing student. He told me he wanted to work in the luxury fashion world, to step into global companies, to escape the blue-collar shadow I had lived under my whole life. I smiled, never protested. Dreams belong to the young. A mother's job is to fuel them, not chain them. Then one day, he collapsed right in class. I got a call from the hospital. When I arrived, seeing my son lying pale and gasping on a hospital bed, I thought I might die on the spot. The doctor said Aaron's kidneys were functioning below 15%. Without a transplant soon, my boy would spend his life tethered to a dialysis machine. Dialysis meant 3 sessions a week, 4 hours each time. Youth shackled to a machine. The thought twisted my insides. My son was not born to live like that. When the doctor asked, "Does anyone in the family want to be tested as a donor?" I didn't hesitate. Me? I'm his mother. Those days of testing were suffocating. I prayed every minute. Finally, the results came. I was a match. I held Aaron close and whispered, "Don't worry, I'll give you what you need." "I just need you to live," Aaron cried. For the first time in years, he cried like a child. I thought that moment would stay in his heart forever. But life rarely works the way we hope. The surgery took place on a spring morning. I lay on the operating table, the surgical lights glaring down. My heart was pounding, not from fear of dying, but because I knew that in just a few hours, my son would have another chance at life. I closed my eyes and prayed that God would carry us both through. When I woke, pain ripped through my abdomen, my throat dry and burning. But I forced myself to turn and look through the glass window. In the room next door, Aaron was breathing steadily, his face already rosier. In that moment, my pain meant nothing. I had kept him alive. Recovery was brutal. I'd spent a lifetime climbing ladders, hefting tools, fixing broken things. After surgery, the doctor warned me, with one kidney, I couldn't do heavy labor anymore. One kidney was enough to live, but my endurance would drop sharply. So I was forced to shift from being the one holding the wrenches and drills to the one managing. I hired extra workers, built a small business called Marion's Home and Property Services. The work was still hard, but I learned to run it with my mind instead of my muscles. I refused to crumble. I still had to provide for Aaron. Aaron, after the transplant, regained his strength and his drive to study. I can still see the day he held his diploma high, eyes shining. In that moment, every sacrifice felt worth it, but I also began to sense something. My son wanted more and more to escape my shadow. He rarely spoke of the transplant anymore, seldom mentioned his illness. I didn't blame him. I thought he wanted to live strong, not be pitied. But perhaps that was when the seed of ingratitude began to sprout. One time when he introduced me to his classmates, he said, "This is my mom. She manages a maintenance company." I saw the hesitation in his eyes, as if embarrassed that my job wasn't glamorous. I pretended not to notice and just smiled. I told myself, it's all right. As long as he's alive, as long as he walks the path he chooses, my life is enough. But I didn't know that one day my silence and patience would turn into a blade, cutting back into my own heart. After the surgery, Aaron recovered faster than I had imagined. Just a few months later, he was jogging, hitting the gym, and posting energetic photos all over social media. I felt relieved, grateful that my son no longer wore the pale, sickly face of someone chained to machines. He graduated with decent grades and soon landed a job at a company specializing in marketing for luxury brands. His starting salary was around $85,000 a year, enough to live comfortably, though not lavishly. To me, it was a dream start. But to Aaron, it seemed far from enough. I began to notice how his new environment changed him. Surrounded by designer clothes, fine dining, and cocktail parties where people discussed yachts and multi-million-dollar real estate, Aaron didn't want to just observe from the sidelines. He wanted to belong, even to be the center of it all. And then he met Victoria Ashford. Victoria was a beautiful young woman from an old-money Los Angeles family, blonde, elegant, with the confident gaze of someone raised in luxury. I knew that for Aaron, winning Victoria was like holding a ticket into the world of the elite. One time he brought Victoria to meet me. I had just returned from inspecting a job site, still in my blue work uniform. Extending my hand, I smiled. "Hello, dear. Aaron's told me so much about you." Victoria shook my hand and smiled, but in her eyes flickered something evaluative. Not outright disdain, but a clear comparison between me and her high society background. After she left, Aaron pulled me aside and whispered, "Mom, next time, could you wear something a little nicer?" Not the work uniform, I froze. It was like a tiny blade slicing through my chest. But I only nodded, not wanting to argue. I thought maybe he just wanted me to be respected. Then came the issue of the house. Aaron said, "Mom, if I want to build a future with Victoria, I need a place that matches." The apartment I rent is too cramped. It's embarrassing when friends visit. I stared at him. Barely in his 20s, earning $85,000 a year, yet already dreaming of buying a house in West LA? I knew it was impossible, but I also understood. He wanted to prove himself, to have a foundation that matched Victoria's world. I lost sleep for many nights. I remembered the surgery, the doctor's words. Without his mother's kidney, he wouldn't be alive. I thought, I gave him life. Why not give him a chance to go further? So I drained all my savings from years of running my business, added a mortgage loan, and bought him a $2.5 million house in West Los Angeles. But one thing I made certain, the deed was in my name. I explained, "Aaron, I'll let you live here, so you have a springboard. But the deed has to stay with me. I took the loan. I'm responsible. Your responsibility is to help me cover maintenance, insurance, and property taxes." He hugged me, eyes moist. "Mom, I promise I'll never forget what you've done." And I believed him. I truly did. At first, he was thoughtful. He sent me money for upkeep, called to check on my health, sometimes even came home to cook with me. But gradually, things began to change. When friends visited, he introduced, "This is my house." I stayed silent, not correcting him. I thought, let it go. If it makes him confident, if it helps him build his place in the world. Soon, Victoria moved in. The house transformed, luxury furniture, modern art on the walls, wine racks filled to the brim. When I visited, I felt like a guest. One time, I gently asked, "Did you remember to pay the home insurance this month?" Aaron frowned. "Mom, that's such a small thing." "Don't bring it up in front of Victoria. It sounds awkward." Awkward. I bit my lip. All those years of sweating to pay bills, and suddenly my efforts had become something to be ashamed of. I began to feel we no longer lived in the same world. He wore tailored suits, drove luxury cars, spoke of million-dollar campaigns and VIP clients. I managed repair contracts, plumbers, electricians. I didn't need his world. I only needed respect. But even that was becoming too much to ask. The breaking point came at a small party. I arrived in a simple navy dress, hair neatly tied back. As I walked in, I noticed a few guests glance my way, then quickly turned back. Aaron rushed over, leaned in, and whispered, "Mom, why didn't you tell me you were coming? This party's a bit formal. Maybe you can sit in the back room." I froze. I was his mother. I had given my very body to keep him alive. I had bought this house. Yet in this very house, I was being asked to sit in the back room. I said nothing. I just sat there, watching the glittering eyes of high society, hearing Victoria's sparkling laughter, and feeling the chasm between me and my son grow wider. At that moment, I still clung to a shred of hope. I told myself, maybe he's just caught up trying to prove himself. Maybe one day he'll realize. But I never imagined that on that Christmas Eve, he would push everything beyond the point of no return. In the final days of the year, Los Angeles wrapped itself in the splendor of the holiday season. Lights draped across the streets, Christmas music floated out of shop windows. Yet my heart felt unbearably heavy. They say Christmas is a time of love, a time of reunion. But for me, it had become a season that only highlighted the widening distance between me and my son. After moving into the new house, Aaron contacted me less and less. The calls grew fewer. The family dinners he once looked forward to vanished. I still remembered how he used to love sitting down to my homemade stew or grinning as he bit into a piece of hot cornbread. Now instead, his life revolved around glittering parties, fine wines, and French cuisine. Every time I called, his answer was always the same: busy. Meetings, dinners, networking events. Promises of, "I'll call you tomorrow," never came true. I began to understand I was no longer part of his priorities. That November, I suggested hosting Thanksgiving as always. Aaron hesitated, then said, maybe I should just rest at home. He'd be attending dinner with Victoria's family. He said it would be more elegant, with more important people, and that I'd probably get tired anyway. His words cut through me like a knife. I knew tired wasn't the reason. He was simply afraid I'd embarrass him in front of her wealthy family. That night, I ate a frozen supermarket dinner alone, sitting before the TV playing a football game, unable to swallow a single bite. When Aaron's birthday came, I wanted to give him something special. I had saved to buy him a classic Seiko watch, not as luxurious as a Rolex or a Patek Philippe, but timeless and durable. It was something he once said he admired as a child. I brought it to his birthday party, eager to see his bright smile. But when I walked in, his eyes flickered with unease. He introduced me quickly, almost coldly. "This is my mom, Marion." I handed him the gift, just about to explain, but he passed it immediately to a server to set aside, without even glancing at it. I stood there in the brightly lit room, surrounded by laughter and clinking glasses. My heart pierced deep. By December, the Christmas spirit filled the city. That's when Aaron called me. His voice carried hesitation, but he finally said he and Victoria would be hosting a Christmas party at the house. There would be important guests, Victoria's father's business partners, some politicians, even the CEO of Aaron's company. He said it was a big career opportunity. For a moment, I felt happy for him, but the joy lasted only seconds. He lowered his voice and told me I shouldn't come. He said I didn't fit the vibe. I froze. Christmas was for family, the most sacred day of the year. And yet I was being pushed aside. I remembered the day he lay in the hospital bed, trembling as he clutched my hand, begging me not to leave. And now, just to save face, he was willing to deny my existence. I swallowed my tears and softly said, "If that's your decision, I'll respect it." On the other end, I heard him sigh with relief. On Christmas Eve, I sat alone in my small apartment, listening to faint music drifting from the wealthy neighborhood where Aaron was hosting his party. My tiny tree in the corner, strung with a few cheap lights, was a painful contrast to the dazzling home I had bought for him. I looked around the silent room, heart overflowing with sorrow and bitterness. But then, in that stillness, another thought surfaced, cold, sharp, and undeniable. That house had never been his. Every document, the deed, the mortgage, the insurance, bore my name. I had given him life. I had given him a home, but I had never given him the right to disrespect and humiliate me. Wiping away my tears, I picked up the phone and dialed Caroline, my longtime friend and lawyer. When she answered, I simply said, "Caroline, it's Marion. I need legal advice about selling the house." December 25th. Los Angeles carried a rare chill, the wind laced with the scent of the holidays. I had spent the entire night restless before coming to a decision. Caroline, my friend, had confirmed every document was in order. That house was in my name, completely. If I wanted to sell it, no one could stop me. And tonight, I would go, not to cause chaos, but to remind my son that everything he flaunted, his very life and this grand home, all came from me. Around 6 in the evening, I put on my oldest velvet coat, freshly cleaned, with a deep blue dress beneath it, the same one I wore on Aaron's graduation day. I had no expensive jewelry, only a tarnished silver bracelet, an heirloom from my mother. I wasn't there to compete in appearances. I was there with the truth. The house blazed with lights when I arrived. Valets stood in line, taking keys from guests pulling up in gleaming Bentleys, Mercedes, and Teslas. I parked my small truck farther down the street and walked in. Outside, trees wrapped in golden lights glowed, while the soft notes of jazz floated from inside. The door was wide open, a security guard in a suit holding the guest list. "Sorry, ma'am, you're not on the list," he said when he saw me. I looked him straight in the eye, my voice calm. "I am the owner of this house." "Paul doesn't pay you to keep his own mother out." He froze, unsure what to say as I walked past him. No one could stop me from walking across those polished wooden floors, the ones I had paid for, down to the last cent. Inside, the scene made me both awed and heartsick. A glittering crystal chandelier hung above. Servers carried silver trays. Guests in tuxedos and evening gowns laughed and mingled. A jazz quartet played "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas." I scanned the room until I saw Aaron, standing near the fireplace in a sleek suit, smiling with a group that included Victoria's parents. His eyes lit up when he first noticed me, then immediately dimmed, replaced by panic. He hurried over, forcing a smile. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I smiled back. "It's Christmas, son." I came for the family celebration. Before Aaron could pull me aside, a woman's voice chimed in. "Oh, this must be Aaron's mother?" It was Margaret, Victoria's mother, elegant, commanding, her smile immaculate. She extended her hand. "A pleasure to meet you." I shook her hand, my eyes never leaving Aaron. Margaret continued, "Aaron has told us so much about this beautiful home. We're truly impressed with how the two of them have built their careers and lives together." I laughed softly, but loud enough for the surrounding group to hear. "Built it? Forgive me, but the truth is quite different." Aaron's face went pale. "Mom, you don't need to—" I cut him off. "Do you all know that 8 years ago, Aaron nearly died of kidney failure?" The room fell silent. Margaret's eyes widened. Victoria stared at Aaron. He swallowed hard, trying to smile. "Maybe this isn't the time—" I pressed on, my voice steady. "My son is alive today because of my kidney. I lay on an operating table for 11 hours to give him life. I lost my health, had to change my career, but I never regretted it, because that's what a mother does." Whispers rippled through the guests. Margaret turned to Aaron. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" I looked at my son. His eyes flashed with anger and despair. But I wasn't finished. I turned to the group. And this house, do you think Aaron bought it with his own earnings? Number: I am the one on the deed. I bought it. I pay the taxes, the insurance, every bill. I did it because I thought my son needed a home to build his future. But I never transferred ownership. This house is still mine. The murmurs swelled into a storm. Victoria stepped back. Margaret tilted her head, her eyes full of disappointment. Aaron leaned close, his voice trembling with rage. "Mom, you're ruining everything." I met his eyes. "No, I'm telling the truth. The truth you've buried under a fake image." The room seemed frozen. And then Aaron snapped, his words slicing through the silence. "You always bring up the kidney, the house. I never asked you to do any of it. I wish I'd gotten that kidney from someone else, someone more worthy." My heart felt like it had been stabbed. But instead of breaking, I found myself eerily calm. I smiled, pulled out my phone in front of everyone, and dialed. "Caroline, it's Marion. Proceed as we discussed. Yes, sell the house. Tonight." The room exploded in gasps and whispers. Aaron's face drained of color. "Mom, you can't—" I cut him off, my voice resolute. "You said I wasn't worthy. Then prove you can live without what came from me. This house will be sold within 2 weeks." Aaron's voice cracked, raw with desperation. "You're destroying my life." I turned my back, walking away under the stunned gaze of every guest, leaving my son drowning in despair in the middle of the party he thought would crown his success. That Christmas night, I was no longer the silent, enduring mother. I became the woman who stood up to reclaim her dignity. After that Christmas night, I knew one thing for certain: there was no going back. Aaron's words, that he wished he had received his kidney from someone more worthy, slashed through the sacred bond between us like a blade. And yet, instead of collapsing, I felt an unfamiliar peace. The next morning, my phone rang non-stop. Not from Aaron, but from Caroline. "Marion, I've already received 3 offers on the house, $2.7 million cash. If you say yes, everything will be finalized within 2 weeks." I sipped my coffee, sunlight slipping through the window of my small apartment. That house had once been a symbol of hope. Now it was nothing but a monument to lies. I whispered, "Go ahead, Caroline." Inside me, the door had already closed. But for Aaron, things were just beginning. Within days, word from the Christmas party spread across Los Angeles high society. I never imagined a family story could travel so quickly. But in those powerful circles, reputation meant everything. An old friend called me. "Marion, did you know your son made the papers?" I opened the news. Aaron's photo filled the society section. "Christmas party turns tragic. Son hid mother's kidney donation. Truth stuns high society." The press wasted no time. They highlighted my sacrifice, Aaron's ingratitude, and the fact that he had been living in a house that wasn't his. Comments poured in. A mother to admire, a son to be ashamed of. I didn't feel joy nor sorrow, just truth. Truth laid bare. Days later, Aaron called me, his voice panicked. "Mom!" "You have to do something. The company's calling me in. They said I violated core values. Margaret, Victoria's mother, she's on the board. She knows everything. I could lose my job." I was quiet for a long moment, then replied slowly, "Aaron, you've chosen image over family too many times. This is just the consequence. Not something I caused, something you created." He choked out, "You don't understand. My career—" I cut him off. "A career built on lies was always going to crumble, son." Aaron fell silent, then hung up. A week later, he lost his job. Sterling Luxury Brands issued a statement. "We uphold family values and transparency." This employee's conduct did not reflect those values called final. Victoria left him too. I heard from acquaintances that after witnessing the party, she told him bluntly, "I can't be with a man who denies his own mother." Aaron lost his job, his love, and his dignity. He suddenly became the subject of whispers. The same people who once flattered him now turned their backs without hesitation. I felt no glee. But neither did I feel pity. This was just the turn of truth. On the day Caroline and I signed the sale papers, Los Angeles basked under gentle sunlight. The buyer paid in full $2,750,000. I moved the money into a private account and rented a modest condo near Manhattan Beach. I didn't buy luxury. I bought peace. As I signed, Caroline said softly, "Marion, you've done what most people never dare. Cut off a toxic dependence." I looked at my signature on the page and felt a weight of 10 years lift from my shoulders. Aaron called many times afterward, but I didn't answer. I knew he wasn't calling out of genuine remorse, only panic. To him, I had always been the lifeline, but this time, I would not throw him the rope. One evening, walking by the shore, I remembered Aaron at 10 years old, running after me on the sand, laughing, calling, "Mom, wait for me!" That boy had once been my whole world. But now he had become someone I no longer recognized. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe one day Aaron will truly awaken and come back. Maybe he'll drown forever in resentment. But I do know this. I am no longer a prisoner of unconditional motherhood. I have reclaimed the right to be respected. As I lay in bed that night, listening to the waves beyond my window, I whispered to myself, I may have lost a house, but I found myself again. And in that moment, for the first time in years, I felt at peace. One late January afternoon, Los Angeles was hit with unexpected rain. Rain here was usually fleeting, but that day it lingered, tapping against the window of my new condo in Manhattan Beach. I had just brewed a cup of herbal tea, ready to settle down with a book, when there was a knock at the door. At first, I thought it was a neighbor or a delivery, but when I opened it, I froze. Aaron was standing there, soaked, his shirt wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. The son who once walked into luxury parties in perfectly tailored suits now looked so broken I barely recognized him. His voice trembled. "Mom, can I come in?" I stood still for a few seconds. Part of me wanted to slam the door, to let him taste rejection. But another part, the part that still ached at the sight of the child I once cradled, wouldn't let me. Quietly, I stepped aside. Aaron walked in, water dripping from his clothes onto my wooden floor. He sank onto the sofa, hands clasped, eyes fixed downward, avoiding mine. Silence filled the room, broken only by the rain outside. Finally, he spoke. "Mom, I've lost everything." I said nothing, just watched. His voice grew hoarse. "I lost my job, lost Victoria. Even my friends turned their backs. I have nowhere else to go. I don't know what to do anymore." I sipped my tea, keeping my tone calm. "Why did you come here, Aaron?" He looked up, eyes red. "I came to apologize. I know I was wrong. I was ungrateful, selfish. I hurt you. I should never have said those words." My grip tightened on the teacup. The memory of him shouting in my face on Christmas Eve came flooding back. I wish I had gotten that kidney from someone more worthy. That wound had not yet healed. I took a deep breath, then said, "Aaron, are you sorry because you lost everything, or because you hurt me?" He was silent. The rain outside grew heavier. Slowly, I continued. "For years, I gave you everything, from a part of my body to the roof over your head. And never once did I see true gratitude. Only now, when you've lost it all, do you come back here." Aaron's voice cracked. "Mom, I know I was wrong. I was blind, obsessed with image. You gave me life, and I disrespected you. I regret it." I searched his eyes, looking for something real. There was desperation, fear, but also something rawer, more honest. For the first time in years, he wasn't hiding behind false confidence. I set my cup down, my voice firm. Aaron, forgiveness doesn't mean things go back to the way they were. I can give you a chance, but there will be boundaries. I will never allow you to disrespect or use me again. He nodded rapidly, tears mixing with raindrops on his face. I understand. I just need one chance. To start over. To be your son again, I sighed. The bond of motherhood still pulsed in me, no matter how battered it had been. I couldn't erase the boy I once risked my life to save, but I couldn't return to the silence and enabling of before either. You can start over, I said, but with your own hands. I won't fuel your illusions anymore. If you earn little, you must live simply. If you want respect, you must first learn to give it. Aaron's voice broke. I will. I promise. I looked at him for a long time, then nodded slightly. I didn't believe in promises anymore, only in actions. And that night, for the first time in years, we shared a meal together. Just a simple bowl of soup I'd thrown together, but it felt strangely warm. When I walked him to the door, the rain had eased. Aaron turned, his eyes still wet. Thank you, Mom. I won't disappoint you again, I answered softly. Don't say it. Show me. He nodded and stepped out into the cold night. I stood there watching, my heart tangled with pain, but also a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, my son would finally learn the meaning of gratitude. That night, I sat by the window, listening to the distant waves. I didn't know what the future would hold. But one thing I knew, this time, I had not stayed silent. I had drawn a boundary, and whether Aaron changed or not, I had found myself again. 6 months had passed since that rainy night. I still remembered Aaron's broken figure standing at my door, drenched and desperate. Back then, I thought everything between us had collapsed for good. But life has its strange ways of teaching lessons, and sometimes pain is the only medicine for blindness. Aaron started over from nothing. No job, no girlfriend, no powerful friends. Just a bit of savings and a small rented apartment in Culver City, far from the glittering neighborhood he once bragged about. I still recall the day he moved in. He called me. Mom, this place only has 1 bedroom. The furniture is old. But at least I can pay the rent myself, without anyone's help. I went silent. To me, that wasn't a loss. It was a true beginning. In those first difficult months, Aaron called me more often, but not to complain. He told me about sending resumes everywhere, chasing interviews. Without the shadow of sterling luxury brands behind him, he had to prove himself on his own merit. Eventually, he was hired by a small marketing firm that worked with local brands. The salary was only $50,000 a year, less than half of what he once made. But when he told me, his voice carried an excitement I hadn't heard in years. Mom, here they only care about real results. They don't need me to party or network. Just to do my job honestly, I smiled. Maybe for the first time, Aaron was learning how to live authentically. We began a habit of having dinner together every 2 weeks. No lavish banquets anymore. Just simple meals, pizza, Chinese takeout, sometimes the beef stew he used to love. Each time he sat across from me, thinner but with brighter eyes, talking about small projects, about clients who trusted him genuinely. Once he sighed and laughed. You know, Mom, I used to think a person's value was measured by the house they lived in or the car they drove. But turns out, real value is how much people can trust you. Hearing that, my eyes blurred with tears. Perhaps this was finally the son I had saved 8 years ago, not the stranger in tailored suits. Victoria never came back. I heard she was engaged to another wealthy businessman. Aaron mentioned her only once, then went silent. I knew the wound was still there, but he had learned not to shatter over someone unworthy. His new job also taught him humility. No more flashy social media posts. Instead, I saw him share photos of small campaigns he worked on, or snapshots with colleagues in a worn-out office filled with laughter. The followers were fewer, but the comments were genuine. My health, too, stabilized. The doctor said my remaining kidney functioned at about 25%. Not great, but not terrible. I learned to slow down, eat healthier, rest more. In the mornings, I often walked along the beach, breathing in the salty air. Sometimes Aaron joined me. He no longer felt ashamed of my old truck. He even pulled out my chair at roadside diners. One evening, as we watched the sunset, he turned to me, his voice deeper than before. "Mom, I need to say something. I used to see your kidney donation as a burden, something you held over me. But now I realize it wasn't a burden. It was a gift, and a gift deserves gratitude, not dismissal." My throat tightened. Tears ran down my cheeks, but this time they were tears of hope. 6 months later, looking back, I understood. The lost house, the hurt pride, all of it was the necessary price to shatter an illusion. If I hadn't sold the house, if I hadn't drawn the line, Aaron might still be living in that false shell, never knowing truth, never learning gratitude. I remembered our most recent dinner. After finishing his meal, Aaron cleared the dishes, then turned to me unexpectedly. "Mom, thank you. Not just for the kidney or the house, but for letting me fall. I didn't realize it then, but that's when I truly learned how to stand up." I looked at my son, and at last, after all the storms, I saw again the little boy who once ran across the beach shouting, "Mom, wait for me!" And I thought to myself, sometimes love isn't about giving everything. It's about knowing when to stop, because only when a person falls to the bottom do they finally understand the true worth of the hands that once lifted them up. More than a year had passed since that fateful Christmas Eve. Time, like a river, had carried away much of the bitterness, yet it also left traces on its banks that would never fade, both wounds and lessons. I still lived in my small apartment in Manhattan Beach. Every morning I brewed a cup of tea and sat on the balcony to watch the sun rise over the ocean. The sound of the waves, the salty air, and the golden light always reminded me, peace doesn't have to come from million-dollar houses. It comes from knowing you've chosen the right path. Aaron was different now, no longer the young man obsessed with gowns, glittering parties, or shiny cars. He was an ordinary man, working 8 hours a day at a small firm, then coming home to cook a simple dinner in his one-bedroom apartment. But I had never seen him so real, never seen his eyes look so calm. We kept our routine of meeting every 2 weeks. Sometimes he came to my place, carrying a bag of cheap Chinese takeout filled with flavor. Sometimes I visited his small apartment, sitting on the worn-out chair, eating while we laughed and shared stories. Neither of us had to pretend anymore. Once, while eating, Aaron hesitated. "Mom, I've thought a lot about the day you signed the papers to sell the house. Back then, I hated you. I thought you were destroying me, but now I see you saved me again. You saved me from illusion." I looked at my son, my heart tightening. I replied, "Aaron, I once thought love meant giving everything, but I've learned that love also needs boundaries. Without them, love turns into indulgence, and indulgence destroys both people." He bowed his head, silent for a long time. Then he whispered, "I'm grateful to you. Not just for the kidney, not just for the house, but because you were strong enough to say, 'Enough.'" Those words, I had waited a lifetime to hear them. Sometimes, old memories still haunted me. I remembered the stabbing pain of hearing my son say he wished for a kidney from someone more deserving. On those nights, I opened my old journal and wrote, as a way of healing. I did everything I could. My love was real. No cruel words can erase that truth. And then I realized those wounds had taught me something. Love does not mean submission. I am a mother, yes, but I am also a human being, with value, with dignity, and dignity can never be traded away, no matter how deep maternal love runs. One day, as Aaron and I walked along the beach, he suddenly asked, "Mom, do you ever regret it? Regret giving me your kidney? Regret buying me that house?" I stopped, looking at the foamy waves in the distance. Then slowly, "No. I never regretted it. If I could go back, I would do it again. But I only regret one thing, that I took too long to learn how to set boundaries. Without that Christmas Eve, you might still be living in lies, and I would have been dying slowly in your disregard." Aaron froze. He reached for my hand, once strong, now rough and trembling. "Mom, I promise I'll never forget. Not what you gave me, and not the lesson you taught me through your pain." I smiled softly. The waves kept breaking on the shore, like the steady heartbeat of life. Now looking back, I understood. My story was not only about a mother and her son, it was about love and boundaries, truth and lies, about how people only truly grow up when they face the consequences of their own choices. I don't tell this for pity. I tell it for anyone living under the weight of being belittled by the ones they love most. Don't let love turn into chains. Remember, true love never denies your worth. I lost a house, lost face in society, even lost a part of my body. But I gained truth. I gained back a son who finally learned to grow. And above all, I gained myself. Tonight, I sit writing these final lines under the soft glow of a lamp, listening to the waves crashing offshore. I close my eyes and whisper a prayer. Please let my son keep walking the path of honesty. Please let him know that gratitude is the only key that opens every door. And then I smile, because I know no matter what the future holds, the greatest legacy I leave my son is not a kidney nor $1 million house. It is the lesson. True love always comes with respect, and respect can never be bought. If you believe that true love is not just about giving unconditionally, but also about setting boundaries to be respected, please leave a like on this video. If you believe that no one, not even family, has the right to deny your worth and dignity, share this story so it can inspire others. And don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Tales, where hidden truths are revealed and where justice and self-respect always find their voice. See you in the next story.